I mean, spring bear is probably my favorite hunt overall. Like if I could do one thing forever, it would be spring bear somewhere, right? But in Montana, in that western border of Montana and eastern border of Idaho, there, it's pretty rare to see a black bear. So like a black bear, most of the time you're seeing, reds and orange and cinnamons and, just not a lot of that true jet black. And so I get really excited when I see a true jet black bear and people think that's funny.
These are stories of outdoor adventure and expert advice from folks with calloused hands. I'm James Nash, and this is the Six Ranch Podcast. A hot drink can become cool in two primary ways, through conduction and convection. Conduction occurs when two objects touch each other. Imagine holding a piece of ice. Before long, your fingers are cold and the ice begins to melt. That's conduction. Convection occurs when a gas or liquid moves from being different temperatures. When you heat water over a stove, the warm water moves up and the cool water moves down. That's what you're seeing when water boils, and that's convection. A stainless vacuum bottle prevents conduction from occurring by creating a void between the walls of the bottle, thermos, or cup and the outside air. It prevents convection by keeping all the liquid inside at the same temperature. That's how a Stanley product keeps your cold drink cold and your hot drink hot. And they've been doing it for 110 years. The Six Ranch Podcast is brought to you by Stanley 1913, and you can check out their new and classic line of products at stanley1913.com.
Mr. Jared Brown from The Draw. How are your holidays, sir?
Good.
That's a big sigh, like you're almost glad they're over.
Yeah, no, just I got to go home to Utah for a week and spend some time with the family. And yeah, I think I'm ready to start this new year and get into application season again. So
what's the first application that's due?
So right now we're looking at Wyoming elk application. So this isn't a point only application that happens later in the year, but if you're wanting to apply for elk in the state of Wyoming this year, that deadline is going to be January 31st.
January 31st. And then after that, it's probably Oregon spring bear, right?
Arizona elk and antelope will happen just before Oregon spring bear.
Okay.
2 days. So February 8th, and then spring bear is February 10th in Oregon.
Okay. Gotcha. Cool. Anything new in Wyoming?
Not really. I mean, there's a little bit happening in Wyoming. They pushed for that 90-10 split on your sheep, moose, and goat stuff there, which did pass. So going into 2023, there will be a new tag allocation for the sheep and moose, which will affect a few things there. And then they did push for the deer, elk, and antelope to do the same thing, and that was denied. So we're not going to be looking at an 8-year wait for a general elk tag in Wyoming.
So what is the 90-10 split? What does that mean?
So the way that the tag allocation works is they're saying 90% of the tags are going to go to residents, and then 10% of those tags are going to go to non-residents, right?
And what was it like before?
So before it was an 80-20 split.
Okay.
So it's going to decrease our numbers of tags by half, right? As a non-resident. So where it's really important, or where it makes the biggest difference, especially for the sheep and moose, is going to be that in those draws, 75% of the total number of tags for non-residents would go to the max point holders, and then 25% of those are going to go into a random draw. But now, because of that, there won't be any, in a lot of units, there's not going to be enough non-resident tags for there to be a random tag in Wyoming for sheep.
Okay, so there's going to be half as many opportunities for non-residents in Wyoming for elk as what there used to be.
Not for elk, just for the sheep and moose.
Just for sheep and moose. So elk remains the same, and antelope
remains the same. Deer remains the same.
Okay. Well, that doesn't sound so bad.
So the only thing, right, is your sheep and moose. So if you have guys that are starting to build points now for sheep and moose, it's going to be really tough because there isn't going to be a random tag available, right? In a lot of the units that where there used to be a random tag available.
Gotcha. So I heard an interesting thing, which was that Alaska now has a couple exceptions. And I don't know if this is 100% true. So maybe you can correct me, or maybe you haven't heard, but it sounds like Alaska now has a sheep tag and a brown bear tag that do not require guides for non-residents.
I have not heard anything about that yet.
Okay.
I'm sure, obviously, I typically will focus on more of the traditional states, your Utah, New Mexico, Texas, Wyoming, Colorado, right? I do try to stay on top of those things as those draws get closer, but I know Jordan, I lean on him pretty heavily on that. He focuses, he's got the traditional states down really well. But I do lean on him pretty heavily on that. And I'm guessing he probably has a good idea of what's going on there with that.
Yeah. No, it surprised me when I heard that. And the buddy that told me, I asked him to run that down a little bit more. He did say that there was really limited numbers on those tags that were available. But yeah, it sounds interesting. I go back and forth on Alaska, whether it's a good thing to have a requirement for guides for a lot of those species. It's interesting. So for black bear, for example, you don't have to have a black bear guide to hunt in Alaska. But if you're hunting black bears in a lot of places in Alaska, there could be brown bears there or grizzly bears there too. So you're exposed to essentially the same threat levels and stuff like that, but you don't necessarily have to legally have a guide. So it's just interesting. It's interesting how that all breaks down. And of course, you've got to draw a line somewhere. And there's, especially with the requirements that Alaska has for their guides and outfitters, you're going to get a high quality individual who's, got a minimum skill requirement that is honestly substantially higher than the minimum skill requirement that's required from guides anywhere in the lower 48. So yeah, good and bad, I can see with it. But if there are some opportunities for people to go and hunt brown bears without a guide, that definitely decreases the financial barrier somewhat, because brown bear tags are crazy expensive.
Oh, and then, I mean, obviously the tag's expensive, but then the actual hunt itself.
Sure. I guess that's what I meant. Like by the time you pay for the outfitter and the hunt and everything, it's, you're going to be looking at a minimum of $20,000, but probably $30,000 to go brown bear hunting.
Yeah. So yeah, no, that would be really cool. I think it would benefit a lot of people. Obviously, I don't like to speculate, but it would be cool if there was something like that available.
Okay. You said Arizona's next. Anything new in the great and sunny state of Arizona?
Nothing as of right now. I'll touch on just quick. They did put a 10% cap on all over the counter tags in Arizona. Doesn't really affect us all that much because we're kind of mainly focused on the draw stuff. But for guys that do want to go and hunt Arizona for any over-the-counter things, there now is a 10% cap on the available tags for non-residents.
And, one of the things that we already mentioned is the spring bear draw is coming up quickly for Oregon, being February 10th. There's some very drawable tags in Oregon for spring bear, especially in the Southwest. I don't think there are any spring bear tags that are 100% chance for residents or non-residents, but resident and non-resident tags do have one thing in common for Oregon bear hunting, and that's that your tag is $16.50. Pretty screaming deal, I think.
Yeah, no, it's I think that's and you can get 2, I believe. Is that correct?
So you can get 2 fall bear tags over the counter.
Fall bear tags.
I don't know of any places in Oregon where you can get 2 spring bear tags.
Right, just on the fall bear hunts, and the fall bear hunts are over the counter.
Right, and that starts August 1st. So if you draw a spring tag, and then you get 2 fall tags, you could, if you get after it, you could harvest 3 bears a year in Oregon.
Yeah, that's pretty special.
Yeah, and come in for like $48 and doing all that. Not too shabby.
Yeah, right.
I think people in Kansas are paying more than that for a turkey tag.
Yeah, no, that's it's cool. It's cool, I think, for the spring bear or just the bear hunting opportunities in Oregon. And then, you're moving into Idaho where it's an over-the-counter tag, Montana over-the-counter, right, for your spring bear and fall bear. And then you've got, Utah next after that, which is a draw tag for both spring and fall. They do have some harvest objective over-the-counter tags in Utah, but for those, better hunts where they're not spot and stock, so any hound or baited hunts you would see on those draw tags.
And that's one of the things that makes bear hunting so interesting is, depending on the regulations in the state that you're in, but say it's a Utah or an Idaho, you can go out and you can have that really high adrenaline, fast action, high energy hunt with hunting with hounds. You can have that bait hunt where you're going to get to observe bear behavior and maybe be a lot more selective about which bear you end up squeezing the trigger on if you get that opportunity. And then if you want more of that high angle, hike, spot and stalk, glass for days, travel through some really crazy country, you've got that for spring bear as well. So it's really an incredible opportunity. And I liken it to any of these high dollar hunts like sheep hunts or elk hunts or deer hunts. You get all of the value of that on a spring bear hunt as far as the hunting style and stuff like that. Plus you get to hunt a really interesting animal being the black bear. I think it's a great opportunity. So Utah, Montana, Idaho, Oregon, Washington no longer has spring bear. Does California have a spring bear season?
I believe they do. And then I know they do have their fall season for sure.
Right. Wyoming has a spring bear season.
Right. Has a spring bear season. New Mexico, it's all based off of harvest objectives in New Mexico, though. So as soon as one particular unit has harvested the certain number, within their objective, then they'll close the season. But that's another state with a spring bear season.
And while that's an arguable approach, I really like that approach to wildlife management. So it's the same way that fisheries are managed in a lot of places, especially commercial fisheries. It's like, hey, this is how many fish we think we have. This is how many fish we can take from that population and still have enough that can go and spawn and create all the new baby fish that we could ever possibly need for the next cycle when those fish mature. So they just let people fish until they've reached that point and then shut it down. I really, really like that. And it makes all the sense in the world to me from a biological perspective. It gets a little sticky in these remote areas where, you know, you may not have cell service while you're on your hunt, and you're checking constantly by any means that you can to see whether the season is still open. But since we have inReach and, you know, all these wonderful satellite communication possibilities today, it's a very doable thing, and it is by far the most precise way to manage these wildlife populations. So I say good on you, New Mexico. What it does require is you've got to know how many bears are out there, and bears are a difficult population to ascertain, but that's a wildlife biologist's job. So figure it out.
Yeah. Yep. No, I'm with you on there. So
any of the back east states have any spring seasons? I know a lot of them have fall seasons.
not that I am aware of.
Yeah.
I'm sure definitely focus more on the Midwest and Western states, but I think that's definitely something that I should be looking at too. But you'll see, Maine and Pennsylvania will have fall seasons and things like that.
New Jersey's bear season is back. That's a win. There is North Carolina has the biggest black bears in the world. We've talked about that before. They got another just absolute stud bear this year that was in that 800-pound range. I think a lot of people saw that picture, but it's amazing that the black bears in Dare and Hyde County, North Carolina, and some in Nash County, gonna throw that one out there. They oftentimes are coming close to double the size of the average greater Yellowstone grizzly bear. Like, they are stupendously large black bears.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, but I think it comes down to the availability of food and resources too.
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, right? But you've also got bears in places where they can live in dumps and stuff like that, where they have unlimited access to food, like as much as they can eat, and they don't get that big. Like, they don't even get half that size. And a 400-pound black bear is an absolute monster black bear.
Monster. Yep.
Monster black bear. And then you double that with the North Carolina black bear. It's like, what is going on? Now, those hunts are ridiculously expensive. You might end up in the $30,000 range to go on a guided black bear hunt there, which is bonkers to me, but they're the biggest of the big. So,
yeah, I mean, if that's what you're looking for, and it must be a genetics thing,
I just think it's a lot of stuff. Food. I'm not going to argue that food isn't part of it. Food definitely is part of it. Climate is part of it, but it's also in this fairly small area of like Dare and Hyde County, North Carolina. There's a refuge there that helps those bears increase population. So when you're playing that genetic lottery, you're going to get more bears, and some of them will have the genetic potential to really grow. And then you've got a climate where the boars don't ever have to hibernate, so they can keep eating all year long. They've got lots of row crops. They've got lots of nuts. They've got some berries. There's just a lot of food available for these animals. And, not every bear can go out at night and graze on peanuts in a field, So when you give them that opportunity, they're going to get big.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Am I missing any other spring bear states?
No, I don't think so. I think we've hit them.
Okay.
The ones that are available.
So I'll talk about Oregon, I guess, with spring bear a little bit. You can sort of hunt east side or west side. East side is going to be spot and stalk, fewer bears, drier climate, a lot steeper, tougher country to get into, especially because a lot of the spring bear places have just monster levels of snow in places during spring bear season. So that one snow drift is going to prevent you from being able to get in there in a truck. But there's lots of bare and muddy ground that you can't get through with a snowmobile. So it's just tough navigation. If you go to Western Oregon, you're going to be dealing with more rain, but you can get around on logging roads and stuff like that. There's a lot higher population of bears. The Western Oregon bears tend to be less photochromatic, so fewer fewer off color bears. And then Eastern Oregon, we find all the colors out here. In my area, black is the least common color and the color that I'm always hoping to find. But we get orange and red and blonde, lots of chocolate bears, different color gradations of those brown. One of the bears I got last fall was gray, which was super, super pretty. And then we've got obviously the black bears, but don't get to see very many black bears on this side of things.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting, and it's very similar to the type of stuff that I hunt in Montana. Spring bear is probably my favorite hunt overall. Like if I could do one thing forever, it would be spring bear somewhere, right? But in Montana, in that western border of Montana and eastern border of Idaho, there, it's pretty rare to see a black bear. So like a black bear, most of the time you're seeing reds and orange and cinnamons and just not a lot of that true jet black. And so I get really excited when I see a true jet black bear. And people think that's funny.
I know they do, because that's they want to see color phase in the worst possible way, and they're just punching the air right now and inside their pickup going to work or whatever. But yeah, it just depends where you go. So this opportunity's here for folks. You can buy your hunting license. I think it's around $155 as non-resident, $8 to put in for a tag here, and then $16.50 if you draw it. So pretty reasonable opportunity. If you don't draw it, you get a preference point, and then your odds are getting higher every year for that. So encourage people to get involved, and our elk will thank you. Our mule deer will thank you, and they will do so by being able to increase their populations. So, okay, that's probably enough spring bear talk. Some other changes and regulations this year around the country. I know Oregon shifted all of its fall season dates, moved it back. That'll be really interesting, especially for, well, I guess not especially, but starting with archery and then moving into rifle. The game has changed. The deck has been reshuffled because these animals are in different places at different times of year.
Yeah. Yep. No, I feel the same way about that. So, and I've heard just, from my understanding, listening to or reading on a few of those different changes there. Yeah. I don't really know, what to look forward to or what to see in those state, in that state, as far as the seasons go, the different changes go.
Well, for the rifle hunts, it's going to be colder, more snow. And there's good and bad that can come with that. If you're a ride or die backcountry guy, hunting in the cold is a lot harder. You have to carry so much gear just to survive that a lot of times there's not a lot of room left, to pack out an animal, and, your daylight gets limited. So now you're spending, 14 hours a day in a tent, because there's just not daylight for the rest of it. And guys can slowly or quickly start to lose their minds under those conditions. For archery, I know a lot of people are excited. Rut tends to be going a lot harder at the end of the season. That's not necessarily a good thing, in my opinion. Just because the elk are rutting harder doesn't make them easier to call in. I think quite the opposite, in fact. So the guys that are going to be hunting that last week of September this year, man, put on your running shoes, because it's going to be a lot faster game than what you're used to.
Yeah, no, I think pushing the season dates back is obviously, like you said, it's going to be tougher, colder conditions for the rifle hunters. But yeah, no, that'll be super fun for the guys that want to go in there and do archery hunts there, being that it'll be right peak rut, typically, right? And is that true for both Eastern and Western Oregon?
I would say so. There's some debate about, how different Roosevelt elk and Rocky Mountain elk actually are. I know for a certainty that we shipped trainloads of elk from Eastern Oregon to Astoria, the mouth of the Columbia, in the earlier 1900s. And so to say that this is a Roosevelt and this is a Rocky are a little bit nebulous. I just don't know. I don't know how real that difference genetically actually is. I'm not a geneticist. I don't know for sure, but I do know that the populations have been muddled significantly. And the only way that the Boone and Crockett Club differentiates them is by which side of the interstate they're killed on. So if they're killed west of I-5, then they're Roosevelt, east they're Rocky. But that goes down the middle of the Willamette Valley that, is Roosevelt habitat on both sides. So it's just tricky. So for me to say, the Western Oregon elk are going to act different from the Eastern Oregon elk, I think is more so to do with the terrain and vegetation and climate than it is to do with any subtleties that may exist in their actual genetics.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, it's nice to, just hear about some of these different things here in Oregon. Obviously, like I said, similar to Alaska, not a state that I'm super focused on myself, just being that I don't have a lot of my guys applying in Oregon, with a little bit of a frustrating point system, but do have a lot of the sheep and goat guys applying there. A lot of my guys applying for sheep and goat there because there is no point system for the sheep and goat in Oregon. But no, that's pretty exciting that they did switch those season dates. So.
Well, let's talk about some states that you're really strong in. What's cracking in New Mexico?
So New Mexico, they did have one major change that I'm actually pretty excited about. It's one that's obviously controversial, but it's no scopes on muzzleloaders now here in New Mexico. So all muzzleloader seasons starting in 23 will not allow scopes or scoped muzzleloaders during those hunts. So what that's looking like is, just based off of, I think a lot of these, unit specific areas where they're archery and muzzleloader only seasons, they only have archery and muzzleloader seasons. I think it'll give you a lot stronger chance of drawing those units, right? A 15, 17, 13 tag, right? Where they're archery and muzzleloader specific. I think a lot of people are going to be shifting away from that and going to rifle specific tags. So if you're a muzzleloader guy and you want to hunt and you're okay with hunting without a scoped rifle, I think New Mexico is going to be a really strong place to be applying for and have a good chance of drawing some of those harder units to draw across the state.
So can you put a red dot on? Can you put any kind of optic, or is it iron sights only?
So iron sights only. Yep. No optics, not even a zero power optic.
Okay.
Like a red dot. So peep sights or fiber optics is all you would be able to use.
Great. And then what are the other regulations for a muzzleloader in New Mexico? Can you have an inline? Can you use, I'm not a muzzleloader guy. So what are the powder
pellets?
Okay.
Just, so non-smokeless powder.
Okay. So you still got to use a black powder.
Yep, traditional black powder and inline muzzleloaders are still okay. So all of your other muzzleloader things, there's no restrictions, just the optics.
Pyrodex, is that what that stuff's called?
Yep.
Gotcha.
They'll either come in 50 grain pellets or I don't know if they do 100, but I think they're doing 50 grain pellets in those.
Okay.
Yep.
And so you can still use an inline, you can still use Pyrodex, you can still use sabos. You're just using iron sights.
Correct. Yep. So I think if a guy can come up with a good system like a peep, I think would be ideal. I think you could still make some shots, in that 200 to 250 type range fairly easily, right? Now, obviously, it comes down to what you're personally capable of, right? Knowing what your maximum range is to make an ethical kill. But I do believe that with a traditional inline muzzleloader, I think you could be really effective with it still.
Yeah. That is interesting. It's always fun when these regulations occur. It's a great social experiment every time. It's like, how is this going to affect things? And everybody, throws out their theories ahead of time. And then when the rubber meets the road, almost everybody turns out to be wrong. And then the next year it evolves some more, right? Because a lot of people are sitting back waiting to see like what happens, how's this going to work? And then they get involved, the following season or the season after that. It's a great game. It's a great game.
Yeah, no, I don't like to speculate, right? Just try to keep things vague and avoid that as much as I can. But I do personally think that with this new change, I think a lot of guys are going to shift to rifle hunts. I don't think there's as many people that are comfortable shooting open sight muzzleloaders as a scoped type muzzleloader.
Okay, so preference points: build them or burn them. Give me a state where guys should be building. Give me a state where guys should be burning.
I do think that guys should be building points in Wyoming and Colorado, right? The Utah thing, Utah just changed their bull elk management agenda. Now they're looking at killing 3 to 4 year old type bulls versus a 6 to 7 year old bull. So the age management went down there. And so I think for a lot of guys that have a lot of points for bull elk in Utah, this year and the next may be a good time to burn those points if you're looking to kill, an older age class bull. Because with this younger age class agenda, they're going to start to increase the number of elk tags that are available in those premium Boone and Crockett units.
That is really interesting. Utah has been such a powerhouse state for, large antlered elk for so long. And I can see both sides of it because I'm not a ride or die trophy kind of guy. I like hunting opportunity and I want more people to have hunting opportunity. And I also get that some people, are, quote unquote trophy hunters and they want the biggest antlers possible. There's been so many lies spun around the industry about, guys saying that, these big mature bulls are past their breeding age, and guys are using that as a reason for justifying shooting them. And that's crazy, man. You've got to get a bull to like 14 or 15 years old before he's not sexually viable anymore. And that just doesn't happen. They get killed by other elk before that ever happens. So I don't know about all that. For me personally, I can see where a lot of folks in Utah are going to be upset about this change, but man, there's going to be a lot of kids that get to hunt that might not have ever gotten to anyways. A lot of adults and newcomers to the game that are going to have opportunities to hunt, to be able to get really healthy meat back into their homes. So I'm for it. Sounds good to me. Good job, Utah.
Yeah, it sounds like they're changing a lot of things there that are making the opportunity just become a lot more available for people, right? In Utah, right? Like the over-the-counter stuff, for instance, right? It sold out. Your any bull tag sold out in 7 hours. Your spike tag sold out. Any spike tag, I think, sold out even a little bit later than that, like 10 or something hours, right? And so it's made it really tough, just the opportunity. So it'll be nice to see that, being that Utah has always been a really long-term type state for non-resident on those limited entry tags. It'll just offer a little bit more opportunity for guys to hunt there more consistently on a limited entry tag.
Man, Idaho was kind of a disaster last year, huh?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Good
Yep.
grief.
Still, that's a tough one for me.
Yeah. It's just chaos. It's like flying on Southwest. Just everybody sprints towards whatever they can get. And I don't know. That's a wild thing, having their system get shut down. So many people are logging on to the system with every device they can come up with. So while, they said that I think they had like 60,000 people on there at one time, it's a good chance that was 20,000 people, some of whom had 6 different devices logged in to try to get a higher number. And it shut their whole website down. They had to restart later on. Dudes are manic. They're just scrambling to get in there to snatch up a hunt. And then when it comes down to it, there are just a massive number of leftover tags at the beginnings of the seasons because people can't actually get it together to do an out-of-state hunt.
Yeah, there's definitely things that they could change. One of those, obviously, if they switch that just to a draw type, on the over-the-counter stuff, just switched it to a draw for non-residents. I think that would save them a lot of headache and save a lot of other people a lot of headache.
Yeah.
Just in general.
Now, almost nobody talks about Texas as a draw state, but there are some draw tags down there. And, you've been working on a strategy on my portfolio to get some of those, and I'm excited about. We'll probably hit those in the next couple of years, don't you think?
Yeah. Yep. They cube their points in Texas, and so and then categorize their points versus being species specific in that state. And so what happens is a lot of guys, residents or non-residents that are applying there, don't understand that part of it, and they'll draw a tag for a unit that's really easy to draw in, and all these other points that they're building for these premium units, because it's categorically accumulated. When you draw, so say you're building whitetail points and mule deer points, if you draw a whitetail tag, you lose all of your points for mule deer and whitetail in that state. And so there aren't a lot of guys that have more than 0 to 1 points. So it's something that we're looking at as being, a 1 in 3 to 1 in 4 odd type draw.
Gotcha.
So,
okay. Do you deal with California at all?
Personally, not a lot in California. I know a lot of their deer tags are over the counter there. And they do have a decent amount of bear tags that are over the counter there as well. And then some draw tags for blacktail and things like that in the northern part of the state, with, not having to take as much time to draw. So 1 to 4 points on a lot of those northern units in California.
Gotcha. Well, it was I think it was 10 years ago yesterday that my contribution to the draw system in Oregon went into effect, which was that if you're an Oregon resident and you're active duty military and you're stationed in another state and you get to come home on leave during a season, you can get a tag issued to you. You can buck tag, bull tag, they'll figure out something to give you. It may not be like, a top 3 trophy unit or something like that, but, we recognized at the time that it was extremely difficult to be able to know in April where you're going to be in October if you're in the Army or the Marine Corps or the Navy, right? You might be deployed. There might be a new war that pops out, some kind of humanitarian crisis, training. You never know. So when you get leave during the season, like, you want to be able to come home and hunt with your family. So now, and for the last 10 years, as of I think yesterday, that's an option. So for my Oregon residents who are military dudes, keep that in mind. And then the other thing is, if you are in the military and you're not an Oregon resident, you rate resident rates in Oregon. which is another cool thing. Most states don't do that.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. I didn't know that in Oregon, so that's pretty sweet. I think it'd be nice to see a lot of other states doing the same thing.
Yeah,
I think.
for sure. I mean, Idaho got so overwhelmed that they had discounted tags for disabled veterans who are over 50% disabled, I believe. And they were so overwhelmed by non-residents that, they have limited access to those tags as well now. So that's part of that gold rush of 60,000 people trying to get in December. It's just bonkers.
Yeah. And obviously, for New Mexico residents here, if you're a disabled vet, there are discounts as far as, tag costs and hunting costs and things like that here. So
talk to me a little bit about oryx in New Mexico.
Oh man, oryx is it's pretty special. I think it's probably one of the cooler hunts I think that a guy could do. I didn't know about it myself for a long time until I moved here. But they have 2 hunts here in the state. They're all free range oryx, so no high fences or so lots of opportunity to hunt them. There's private land tags and then there's draw tags. Private land tags you can purchase with a landowner. Not very many options there. Basically none there as far as the private land option go. But then you have White Sands Missile Range, where the majority of the oryx live here in the state of New Mexico. And that's a once in a lifetime tag. So if you were to draw any of their seasons on the missile range, it is a once in a lifetime tag, unless it's a broke horn tag.
Okay. So what's a broke horn tag?
So you can only kill an oryx that has, I believe it's 60% missing on one side, and then the other side can be full length horn. So if you don't, it doesn't matter, what oryx you're killing. Like if you just like hunting oryx, or you want an opportunity to hunt oryx, you could draw one of those tags and harvest oryx. Just an oryx. And then they've got off-range tags, which are all public land, right? For the most part, there's lots of public land to hunt, but you're hunting fairly low numbers of oryx on those off-range tags. So you would be hunting off-range, means everything off of the military installations. So those oryx generally live within, a couple miles of the fence. So they're not leaving the range a ton unless they're running missions on range.
Okay. Gotcha. So when they're dropping bombs out there, that tends to scatter the oryx a little bit.
Yeah. It seems like it pushes them off a little bit more than others, and in different areas. But I'd say within a couple miles of the range in all directions, north, west, south, east, you'll see oryx. Not many. We've had, I want to say 9 this year, off-range oryx tags, and we've gone 100% on them. There's days you'll go without seeing an oryx on those, and then the next day you'll run into a group of 20. But it's not one of those hunts where you're going to see them everywhere, all over the place. An on-range hunt, you'll see, you could see up to 200 a day on an on-range type hunt.
And they're such cool animals.
Oh yeah, no, they're incredible. Like, I get geeked out about them all the time, and every time I see one, I get so excited. Like, it's like the first time I've seen one. The first time I see them on that hunt, like, I just get giddy. Right, it gets me really, really excited when I see them. They're a super neat, cool animal. Obviously, they've got I would say they're in between a deer and an elk in size. So probably the size of like a donkey. They've got real short legs, big big, deep chest. So an endurance animal for sure. It makes sense. Being that their native range is the Sahara, right? So big, vast expanses of land. So they're used to it, and so it's just a cool opportunity for guys to come and do. So if you're looking to go on an oryx hunt and have a little bit better draw odds, the off-range oryx, like if you just want to go oryx hunting, and you don't care about size or anything like that, I think that off-range hunt, and you're willing to grind a little bit, it's definitely more of a mental grind than a physical grind. So you're going to be covering lots of country, glassing a lot, just trying to pick one up, versus seeing lots of groups and being able to decide, what you want on like an on-range type hunt. And those on-range hunts obviously are a lot more difficult to draw than an off-range.
Well, look, we've gone over a bunch of regulations in a bunch of states. For the folks that are still hanging in here with us at this point in the show, obviously they're interested in hunting in lots of states and understanding what these regulations are, and it can be overwhelming. It is overwhelming. It's overwhelming for me to think about, and even for you, who this is your profession, you're focusing on a region of the U.S. to become an expert in and maintain currency on all the changes. If somebody wants to develop a hunting strategy so that they're gaining points in a lot of states, that they know which units to be applying in, that they're looking for opportunities for now and into the future, and they're making this hunting plan, like you guys are the people to talk to about that. How do they do that? How do they get a hold of you? How do they start that conversation?
Yeah, you can reach out to us on we're on Facebook, Instagram. You can go to our website. It's just thedraw.com is our website, and you can reach out there. There's a form, contact us form that you can reach out there. You can always call us. Our phone number is 575-222-1234. So you can always reach out that way. And then through any of our social media contacts as well. And one of our consultants will get with you, and, we'll talk about your goals, because that's where we can have a good solid idea of what you're looking for, whether it's state or species or things like that. We can help you come up with a plan using those applications to create the opportunity.
Oh, that's awesome. You've been a tremendous resource for me, and I've had hunting opportunities through the draw that I would never have had otherwise. And hunting is very important to me, and I'm very grateful for those opportunities, and really grateful to you, Jared, for keeping me in the loop and making sure that I'm not missing out on years and preference points. And when opportunities come up, you're always reaching out. I really appreciate that. You're doing a fantastic job. Thank you.
I really appreciate it. And just always looking forward to working with more people and with yourself and seeing, how your plan develops and the different hunts that we're able to go on. So yeah, no, I really appreciate your time and letting me be a part of this podcast.
Thank you very much. Well, sir, I hope you're off to a great start on this new year, and I'm sure I'll see you at some shows. You going to be at Hunt Expo this year?
Yep. February 2 through 5. So we'll be there.
See you there.
All right. We'll see you. Thanks, James.
All right. Thank you.
About a decade ago, I launched my old aluminum drift bow onto a remote whitewater river and floated for a couple sunny spring days to meet some friends who were bear hunting downstream. While I made them dinner that evening, one of my buddies came over and showed me a SIG rangefinder. I'd heard of the company and I'd seen their gear while I was a Marine, but this was the first time I'd seen one of their products built for hunters. The range popped up instantly, and it continued to range everything I put the reticle on as I scanned across the canyon. I'd never seen anything like it on the civilian market, and frankly, not on the military one either. Since that day, SIG has come out with a long list of high quality and innovative products for hunters, as well as continuing the same for military, law enforcement, and responsible citizens. They have some great training facilities located around the country too. Check out all that SIG has to offer on their website, sigsauer.com. And this episode of the podcast is brought to you by SIG. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share the show with a friend. You can also rate the podcast and leave a review. Your support allows me to keep doing what I love, which is meeting incredible folks and sharing their stories with you. For more content and photos, follow the show on Instagram at Six Ranch Podcast or me at Six Ranch Outfitters. This episode was produced by Emily Brannigan, with original music written and performed by Justin Hay. Art for the Six Ranch Podcast was created by John Chatelain and digitized by Celia Christofferson. Tune in every Monday for a brand new episode of the Six Ranch Podcast. I'll catch you next week.